All
the
right.
pastor and the postmaster.
Woo!
Here we
Meow.
are.
Howdy,
What you want to know but wasn't in the sermon.
where the academy meets everyday life.
Brow.
With our co-host and our
I'm here
producer
again.
here. Lovely.
I'm only supposed
Great.
to pop in here and there, but we don't have a guest today.
This is not going to be in the sermon. It was not in the sermon because it is a story about Bo Vance and his testimony and his conversion, and it involves Mormonism. Bo, so tell us a little bit about your upbringing and bring us to your time in Mormonism.
Yeah, so growing up as a kid, I grew up in a nominal Christian home. In other words, I know my dad and mom sent checks to the Methodist Church, but we never went on. I never went on Sunday. My sisters were both involved in MYF, Methodist Youth Fellowship, those kind of things. When I was in high school, my sister, my middle sister, she was involved in a Nazarene Church, youth group, that kind of thing. So that was always around. And I can remember real vivid conversations with my mom about religion because as a small boy, I was a discipline problem at school. So I was put out of kindergarten, and I had to go to a Christian school where I had gone to preschool when my mom went to work and so forth. And
I was held back in kindergarten, just so you know.
were you too?
I was. I always got dogged about it.
Really?
Because I was always the oldest kid in the class. I was 19 when I graduated high school.
No wonder he did so well academically.
I
I question everything.
I hate the church. I looked younger than everybody else, but I was like the oldest kid in the class.
I didn't know that.
Anyway.
How funny.
Yeah.
I don't know
Squirrel.
if I can go on with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, I was a discipline problem. So and it wasn't because I was bad. It was because I was too social and stuff like that. So I was sent to a Christian school for the up to grade 3. And I love baseball. I love sports. And our school didn't have sports. So my parents, I begged them, and they let me go to public school. And that was my downfall. That was when it all went downhill. But no, I went to Lindsay School, and I want to mention that because Vita Lindsay was this woman, stern-looking woman. I called her, I told people she looked like Lyndon Johnson with a wig. She was unmarried.
That sounds
as far
like
as I
a
could
German name to me.
She was just awesome, and she had this school because she loved children, and she loved to give them the gospel. And after I came out of Mormonism, she was still, I went looking for her like around 2000, and she was still alive. She'd moved back to Texas, and I got to communicate with her and tell her, hey, I was born again, and she told me about other students that had gone through the same thing. So when I was a little boy, I went to this Lindsay School. It was right over by Biola. I was growing up in
Sisters
Whittier.
are graduate of
And I like to point out to people, in those days, you didn't send a kid to Christian school for a superior education, And so I was in there with the pastor's daughter in these classes and future felons of America. I would, later in life when I was in junior high and high school, I ran into the same guys that I was going to these classrooms with, and they were total, felons.
Wow.
And, so that's kind of the mix that it was. But so I heard the gospel over and over and over, and I knew what it was, totally not interested, just not interested. And sometime I can talk about when I realized, I'll tell you just now, it seems weird and impossible, but I was always listening to what was going on around me, evidently. But I can remember at age about 6 or something, I can remember being in my bedroom. I was looking at this train set my dad had built me. He was like he could do carpentry, really nice train set and stuff. And I was looking there and I was reflecting before going to bed. And this literally happened. This is a true story. And I was thinking, and I thought, it just struck me. I thought, at some point, I'm going to die, and the universe, this world, it's just all dark. I'm going to die, and nobody's going to even know I ever existed.
Wow.
And I thought, I was just shocked. And then I had a plan because I love baseball. I thought, I'm going to play baseball. I'm going to become a baseball star, and then they'll always remember me. So that was kind of my
classic way of immortality.
Isn't that weird?
Through other people's praise.
I mean, what was going on that I was thinking this stuff? So all the way through school and high school, I didn't believe any of the Jesus stuff. And then I was growing up down in Southern California where the Jesus Revolution was taking place.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I knew
Another
I was
podcast.
running into Christians all the time. I was always on Whittier Boulevard, running into people. I might have taken a free Bible for some people, from some guys, and acted like I was saying the sinner's prayer just to get them out of my face. I don't know how many of those I did, but it was just totally.
But you were a statistic for salvation.
I didn't hate the Christian.
Nice.
I've always been, and this is kind of, I think it's my personality, but I've always been kind of like, hey, that's cool. And in those days, you could do that. Like, you're into Jesus, you're into drugs, that's cool. And so I didn't hate the Christians. They were just annoying. And they were. And plus, I was all about fun. So I was like a maximum hedonist kind of fun kind of guy. And so when I became, when I was about 17, when I was a senior in high school, a number of crises hit. Like, I broke my leg in football. I was a big football star, had a big future, and all that kind of stuff. And my girlfriend and I broke up.
No.
Traumatic.
Yep.
But so all these things came down, and up to that point, if people my age, I had kind of a charmed life. I didn't have a curfew. I was hitchhiking all over the place. I talked last time about my high school. I graduated with a 1.2, just cruised through that, surfed, smoked a little pot, I had a great life. That any teenager at that time would have loved to have had. I had friends and all that kind of stuff. But I hit this crisis, and I literally thought, is this it? This is all there is? Because I kind of lived the life, and I thought, which again is a weird, I think, sort of conclusion for somebody 17.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I thought, this is it, And so I just had a real crisis. And so I went over to the bookcase and got my mom's Bible. She had a King James Bible because she went to Sunday school and all that when she was a kid. So I was reading out of her Bible. And of course, I started in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1.
Nice.
Another podcast.
So I just started reading, and I knew the gospel. I remembered what people said. And so I asked the Lord to forgive me. I had a real heavy sense of condemnation, self-condemnation, sin, that I was evil. That was real clear to me. I was evil, and there was no reason to believe that at that time, because I wasn't doing anything that was evil back then.
Yeah. You typically think of the word.
I was just doing the typical stuff, and but I had a real sense of guilt, and so I asked the Lord to forgive me, to come into my life, to save me. I was thinking like that. And so it was pretty instantaneous. I felt instant relief. I felt this weight taken off, and the Bible started making sense. And I told people I was born again, and it kind of some of my friendships, like we had a fun group of guys that I hung around with. I kind of was no longer part of that.
Didn't have the same loves.
Yeah, and that kind of went on and developed. I mean, I was still hanging out with guys and still doing a lot of stuff, but and I like to caution people here. Richard Baxter said, "God breaketh not all men's hearts alike." Yeah. So we all come to the same place. We believe the same gospel, but it's how we get there is different, especially if you've grown up in the church. So I like to make that clear because my conversion was kind of like what you would think of an evangelical, dramatic, instant conversion. And I became clear on that real soon, that that's not how it works all the time.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I would say it doesn't work that way real often. So, but it was pretty dramatic. And so this was sometime in November. And one of the guys I used to party with and have a good time, who I just learned passed away 3 years ago in Mesa, Arizona, he came home from BYU.
Wow.
He was at BYU, and so he came home, And we got together and we headed out to do our usual thing. We're driving around Whittier, Whittier Boulevard, Turnbull Canyon. And at some point I knew I was going to have to tell him. And I can't remember if it was him or me. I think it was me. I said, hey man, I don't get high anymore. I'm a Christian. And he goes, me neither. He goes, I'm done, And I said, oh, cool. And as we drove up Turnbull Canyon one time, and we saw this thing flickering like at the top of the hill. It's this place in Whittier. You drive up and you get to this crest of a hill.
Yep. I know.
And you come to a stop sign, and we saw this fluttering thing. And so he pulls up and opens his door and reaches out, pulls out a full baggie of pot, like a full baggie.
No kidding.
Yeah. So we're just laughing. We're going, dude, can you believe this? Toss that.
No kidding. I mean, nowadays it have like fentanyl in it. I mean, it would be not chill if you picked it up.
Well, the last time I smoked pot, it had PCP in it.
Okay, that's another story.
Oh, that's
Really quick question for you. Were you being discipled in your new faith? So that was kind of an open door to kind of any kind of teaching. Wow.
I didn't know my Bible. I didn't know jack. I just know there's all kinds of people all over the place on Whittier Boulevard witnessing to me.
Wow.
There's Christian coffee houses.
It was everywhere.
Yes.
It was everywhere at that time.
Yeah. I can tell you, I went to a Christian coffee house when I was like 15, 14, saw this rock band called Agape, Power Trio, with a couple parents at this table with their church kids, the parents in suit, tapping their toes to this full-on like power trio. Like Grand Funk Railroad or something.
No way.
And I thought, isn't that interesting, But I'm not interested. I was there for the music. But anyway, so
the big outreach, they did a lot of those back then.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
It was
the
everywhere.
Concerts.
So Joe says, hey, yeah, I don't do that either. And he goes, hey, you want to meet the missionaries? And I go, who's that?
Oh, boy.
And he goes, well, they're missionaries from my church, And I go, sure. So I start taking the missionary lessons, the Mormon missionary lessons, and the room's lighting up, So my first like real supernatural phenomena experiences were dark, even though it's light,
Wow.
Like most Christians, their first supernatural healing experience might be a healing or something,
Right.
Mine was stuff like this, and so. And the message resonated with my human side of me, like you can be a god kind of stuff.
Right. Which you find in some Christian circles.
Yeah.
Taught. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And the Mormon missionary lessons are set up in a way, I don't know what they are like now, but in those, you can't get through it without buying into it. Yeah. I mean, you can, but I use a lot of hyperbole.
Oh yeah.
I use hyperbole all the time.
Yep. Jesus used hyperbole.
So
I like it.
So and plus it was countercultural kind of. And I had long hair then, and they were very nice to me, and so anyway, I kind of bought it. There was something bugging me, but nagging sort of, but I bought into it. And so when I was 18, I was baptized into the Mormon Church, and so I started going, and then then the pressure started coming, like cut your hair and that kind of stuff, and so eventually, not going into such granular detail anyway, I had a girlfriend, and so I dragged her into the church with me. She converted. We became active members. She taught Sunday school, and I did the things that you do. But I didn't go on a mission, which people would find fault with. Mormons would find fault with.
You're not really a true convert.
Yeah. And so and I've heard all that stuff. It's kind of funny, but no, but we were going to get married, so it was kind of like, oh, okay. And for those skeptics out there who said that I should have gone on my mission. My bishop gave me the temple recommend, and we went through the whole process.
I see.
Yeah, and so we were married in the LA temple.
Wow.
In 1976, the bicentennial. And
you're still married to this lady.
Yes, and at this point, so obviously we came out of Mormonism, and relatively speaking, we had it kind of easy. It was totally traumatic, physically, mentally, emotionally. There's a lot of stress on our marriage, but relatively speaking, we had an easier time than most people do coming out of Mormonism.
Wow.
So like when we got married in the temple, none of our family could be there, and we didn't have family that were just like, oh, well, if we can't go to the ceremony, our families were both pretty laid back. We had a reception and everything, and my parents were always really good about that kind of stuff, and so and we didn't have that cultural background.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I led the way out in the sense that I was the first one that stopped wearing my temple garments, and that was, alarming to Denise.
Interesting.
And it was all about the conflict, because I believed I was saved by grace through faith originally, and then I was Galatianized into Mormonism.
Wow. Yeah.
Mormonism.
So would you have said that you believed, so since you weren't being really discipled, you were having, the Holy Spirit was really in essence interpreting the Bible for you. So you looked at it and you read it and you understood grace through faith in this time, or you had heard teaching on it?
I'm still struggling with that.
Gotcha.
And that's what made me uneasy and grinding the whole way through Mormonism.
Wow.
So we were active for like 4 years after the temple marriage. We were on record until about 1980, and that's another story that took place right down the road here.
Wow.
So we were active just 4 years, and then the 3 years is a process of me finally going, I can't do this anymore, and just a number of factors, like a friend who got saved, who never, in a million years would have got saved, and we became friends. I mean, we got tight again. We were really tight in high school. So there's a number of wonderful things that happened, but so it took 3 years to navigate out of that. And the key was chance encounters with people, providential.
Yep.
But in my mind, what was going on is I was just, again, coming to terms with the Lord and saying, Lord, I can't do this. When I die and when I go before the great white throne or whatever, I'm just going to beg you to let me in.
Wow.
Because I can't.
Wow.
I can't pull this off.
Yeah.
And then, immediately I thought, hey, wait a minute. That's what all my Christian friends are just saying, So it's kind of like, if I already believe that, so I
don't believe this.
Yeah, so I actually believe that. Like I can go up and beg my way in.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started hanging out with these new Christian friends, and that introduced me to all kinds of stuff. Like I went to some really awesome hyper Pentecostal churches, went to Calvary Chapels down in Southern California when I could, and so that was developing over time. And by the time 1979 came around, we moved from Southern California up to Nevada City. And that was kind of like the clean break, like, okay, that's it. When we get up there, I'm going to find a church, and I did. Denise hadn't moved up yet. The first thing I did was start going to churches in Nevada City. And At that time, I was still kind of thinking, well, I might go back to the Mormon church. You're in this place where you're not making sense, right? Mm-hmm. For the 3 years, it's not really making sense. Like, it's not logical. So we came up here and thought we were off to a clean start. And then my home teacher showed up.
Which is a Mormon.
Yes. It's the person who's responsible for you.
Okay.
From the local ward up in Nevada City, and got a hold of us because we didn't know that they would get your address change and follow you.
Oh my God.
If you're still a member. And that's and at that time
We won't do that to you.
Yeah.
my way of thinking. Yeah, my mind was like thinking like this. This is literally what I thought, which is, we're having a podcast. We're talking about being researchers, writing books, I've never had these high ambitions, which I can't recommend that, especially the high school kids.
Yes.
But I've never
Reach
had
for the
these,
stars.
I've never had these plans. So when we moved up here, this was my thought. I'm a mailman who is a Christian. I'm a Christian. My whole life was built around Christ. I've got one child, another on the way. My wife, we're a family. I'm going to mow the lawn. I'm going to support my family, and that's pretty much it.
Simple.
Those were my aspirations. And
I think that's innate in each of us because we want to. I mean, the Bible talks about a quiet life, right?
yeah, First Thessalonians.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think that's godly.
Yeah, it's a godly life, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that was it. And
Dignified quality. Yeah.
and then how that rolled out into leaving the Mormon church is pretty funny and interesting. And then how I got into establishing a chapter of ex-Mormons for Jesus and all the occult activity associated with that. And then getting into research because meeting people like we talked about on the last episode, people like Michael Marquardt, others who are not formal, who are not formal researchers, making some of the biggest discoveries in Mormon history.
Well, is it possible to get this person on, or is he?
They're gone.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
I was going to say some of the things you're mentioning, I think is quite interesting. I think. Did you happen to have any of those experiences in that time that were kind of supernatural? Like anything that was like,
Oh yeah.
incredibly deep, like that would have said, light bulb.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about
Yeah,
it.
tell us about it. Do you have
Okay.
anything? Yeah.
I just told somebody about this, and I have to say I've experienced a number of pretty dramatic things. So, again, I'm not a very ambitious person. So I like to leave it up to the hearer, and they can decide. So I will say I've experienced dramatic things. So. Back when I was taking the Mormon missionary lessons, so I was a senior in high school, I was 17 years old, I had an experience one night that I didn't talk to many people at all about. I didn't talk to them about it at all because I didn't know what to make of it, and it happened at night. And so I thought, well, that might have been just me dreaming, or whatever. But then, so I'm going to fast forward to frame the story as something that actually did happen. So in the early 80s, we had established, Denise and I, a chapter of ex-Mormons for Jesus in Grass Valley, Nevada City. And so we would have, and we had this ministry where we had these 52 pre-recorded messages on an answer phone. Do you know what an answer phone is? Tape, two tapes.
Yeah, totally.
So one tape gives you a message, and then the other records.
Okay.
And so and then we promoted it, like in the Union newspaper. I printed stuff. I had we put stuff out. And so it was totally anonymous, and we would send out packets of information to people who wanted to know about Mormonism and Mormons who wanted to, talk confidentially. And so we would get, for a number of years, we would get like 40 to 50 messages a week.
Wow.
People playing the message and so forth. And they were on 52 different topics about Mormonism and Christianity.
Every week of the year.
Yeah. And so I got a call, and this would happen occasionally. Somebody would move into the area or something. So I got a call from this woman, and she said, I'm a former Mormon, and I just saw your ad in the paper or something. Hey, can we get together and chat? I said, sure. Where do you want to meet? Humpty Dumpty. Okay, great. So I went down there, Denise is at home, put the kids to bed. And I always liked Humpty Dumpty because we could sit in the front window with a woman across from me. It's wide open. Everybody knows that, there's nothing strange going on. So we sat down and talked, and she'd just come in from Colorado. She just moved to the area. And she said, yeah, I left the Mormon church and I'm a Christian now. And so we're just talking. And what I'm going to say is, I guess it depends on your experience, but what I've learned and what I've seen is that Mormons experiencing occult phenomena is not uncommon, and I would say it's more common than not. Okay? Encountering their dead relatives and talking with familiar spirits and so forth, which, surprise, that's how it all started, right? You know, Joseph Smith talking to Moroni and these others.
Yeah, that is true. A lot of friends will confirm that.
Yeah. And we can talk about the intersection with occult witchcraft and all that kind of stuff, because there is that. And I encountered that a little later. But so we're just chatting and going, you know, it's kind of like it's helpful to talk to people who have had the same experiences and so forth. And she goes, hey, so when you were taking the Mormon missionary lessons, did you get the swirling mist?
Wow.
And I went, what? Mm-hmm. And she said, yeah, the black swirling mist. Wow. She said, I've met a number of Mormons who, ex-Mormons who had the same experience.
Wow.
And I said, explain it to me. She said, I had the missionary lessons. The missionaries left. I sat down. I was turned on the TV, and out of the TV comes this demonic presence, this demonic being with this swirling black mist. And I just said, yeah, I saw that.
You did?
Yeah. And so what it was is when I was taking the Mormon missionary lessons, so I'm immersed
visibly
in this.
seen it. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, to our listeners, whatever. This you can take it.
Haters.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I don't mind. I don't mind if people.
Not at all.
But I'm sure there are people that if they're honest, because I believe you.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if anybody, says, hey,
that's happening.
I saw
Yep.
that.
Absolutely.
So,
let us know in the comment section.
So it's just one night, and we had a stray dog that came to our house, and so he became my dog Jet. And anybody who knows me from that period knows me and Jet. Jet went everywhere with me. And so he would sleep on my bed. I get into bed, he'd come up and he'd just lick my face. He's a little puppy. And then, a young dog. And then he would get down, at my feet and spend the whole night with me. So we were just inseparable.
Uh-oh.
So, one night I'm with my buddies. I get home. It's around 11 o'clock. I go to bed. Jet's there. I fall asleep. And either I wake up or I'm in a dream state. I don't know what it was, but what's happening is I saw myself like projected into like this dark place, this cave, and there's a skull. So I see this skull, and there's like a demonic, nasty being there looking kind of guy. And the next thing I know, I'm in the skull, and I'm chanting with all these chanting beings around me that I can hear, and I'm chanting in tongues. Now, I have no framework for that. Like, I can remember my sister who was at college talking about going to a church where people spoke in tongues. So I'd heard of that.
But you hadn't done.
But I'm not a Christian. I'm not immersed in that world. I had no framework. And I go, what's that? And oh, that's interesting. Whatever.
Interesting.
So I have no framework for this. And so I'm speaking in tongues, and it's a chant, and I don't know what I'm saying. And I start feeling good and peaceful.
Wow.
And I'm like, and all of a sudden it just strikes me, and I go, this is wrong.
Wow.
I want out of here.
Whoa.
And I want that being gone.
Right.
And I don't know if it was the Mormons that told me this. I think it was the Mormons that said, you can command, if a demon comes, you can command it and it'll leave. I don't know
They did teach that.
I think it was Mormons.
Yeah.
It might have been a Christian friend. I don't know. So now I'm struggling to say that. I leave in the name of Jesus Christ. Leave. And I can't say it. I'm just involved in this thing. And finally, I blurt it out. And boom, I'm back. And I'm like bolt up in my bed. And this black, I face this window in my little home, my my childhood home with the
Yeah.
window, and I see this black swirling mist with this demonic face being in the center of it, just swirling. So I'm commanding it to leave, and finally it starts going out, and it took a while to
Powerful.
go away.
Were you paralyzed? I hear there's some kind of thing with sleep paralysis.
Yeah, I was just
Okay.
like, and I looked for Jet. Jet's gone.
No.
And I'm like, I'm getting out of this room. So I went all the way across the house, which is to our family room, and Jet's over there as far
Jet.
away as
He
Bounced.
didn't want to be in there.
he was gone.
Deuces. Yeah.
So
Didn't
that
wanna
was
be in
the
there.
experience. And I,
Wow.
so what's the value of knowing that? Well, the value to me was like, this person had the same experience. So maybe that was real. And it was a very, there's palpable evil. There's a supernatural realm that's as real as can be.
Yes.
So for me, running into other things down the road,
Which we'll talk about.
yeah, and understanding, these two different dimensions, the metaphysical and the physical, and what goes on in the world. It's not a stretch for me. Like, it's not a stretch to think that there's something going on behind the scenes. There's spiritual warfare, and it helped me to interpret things that would happen in my life.
And it's interesting, Bo. I mean, my mom was most of her life, early life, she was raised in Idaho, Pocatello, Idaho, so a heavily Mormon
That's Mormon
population.
country.
Yeah, it's really interesting because kind of funny story that my aunt, who lives in Boise now, I guess had done some kind of project in high school, public high school, and Mormons are a high percentage in public schools.
Sure.
It's
So
very interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, hey, we're all Mormons, even though it's only 75 or 80%.
Yeah.
But, hey, we're all Mormons.
Right.
She had a Mormon
Like
teacher.
like Napoleon Dynamite.
No,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
fine.
But
Totally.
Preston, Idaho. That's it. And a lot of it is very like there's a reason why people get it.
Yeah.
And so it was like a home ec class that my aunt had made, and she made a menu, and she put iced tea for one of the failed the class.
What?
Can't have caffeine.
Hot drink.
That's
Failed the
true.
class.
Iced tea
I
is a hot
remember
drink.
hearing.
And my
What?
grandmother, my abuelita, went, I'm going to sue you if you do this. So she went in there and fought
You
but no caffeine.
Yeah. What's crazy to me, the tongues thing, it's crazy how, for me, I wouldn't call myself like any camp. God is a big God and he can do whatever, cessation, continue. I don't know. But you do see a lot of this. That's why I think one of the reasons why we're here, because you do see a lot of, like how you have the triune God, you would have the Satan would want to recreate that. So, in essence, you'll have the Antichrist, the false prophet and the
beast.
Image of the beast. Yeah. So there's always this kind of duplicate that he needs to duplicate things. So, so for the untrained eye, you're speaking in tongues and you're like, oh, this is great. And this is a good feeling.
It's from God.
Exactly. But innately, because of your knowledge, thank God that you were a believer, or believed in Christ,
Greater is
right?
he that is in you.
Greater is he. Yes, exactly.
So that's why.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why I think I was Galatianized and I was actually born again before I went into Mormonism.
Amen.
Because I was providential, delivered from a lot of things along the way, and believe me, inside of me and me blundering and wandering around, like I'm not smart enough to figure out that that's a demon.
Right.
There has to be somebody in me.
Wow. The Holy
And
Spirit.
I'm not
Woo.
smart enough to work out, like Christians, down through the centuries are working out grace and works. How does that?
Right.
Where, so somebody in me was grinding that, I had no
Wild.
categories for it. I just knew there's a problem here with this faith and works thing.
Could you see in that moment how one could be disillusioned into thinking this is a good thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's what,
Yeah.
and then you realize that in all the major religions in the world,
There's ecstatic experiences.
ecstatic speech, right? So
Interesting.
Sufis,
Sufis,
right?
yeah.
Hinduism.
Right.
And, we always think of the animists or the primitive peoples. Or the people that are doing psychedelics and stuff. But no, like in Islam. And
Islam, you have the Sufi Islam.
But it's crazy because he's the father of lies. and everything he does is a lie. And so he likes to steal, kill, destroy.
But look at it from the materialist or the atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so Christianity is just another one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what sets Christianity apart?
The thing is that sets people apart is the name of Jesus will always work. Like, I mean, not. I don't know if it always. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the thing. All these other religions, they have pulled from Jesus, and they all have to use the name of Jesus. I think it's all of them. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong again, but they have to steal from that playbook.
I think it's we worship a triune God, and we believe that the Holy Spirit is the one who enlightens us. Mm-hmm. He begins the process. He's in the middle of the process, and we can talk about that later. But I think that's the big. That's really the issue, is a triune God.
A triune God.
Not a strictly Unitarian God like in Islam or
in liberal Christianity. Unitarians.
Because,
it's interesting. And, Bo, you are obviously devout. And, there are probably all sorts of Mormons right there. Mormons that are like more culturally Mormon. And there are people who are serious. You were serious.
I was a convert.
You were a convert. You were not just into it.
I bought it.
But my friend Jared, right? And they've had a podcast for a while called Salty Believer Unscripted because they're in Salt Lake City. Yeah, I've been on it before actually, a while back now.
Shout out.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out. Risen Life Church in Utah.
We'll have to do a crossover.
Yeah. And so he said, for instance, he was talking to neighbors. He has a lot of Mormon neighbors, and you're a little bit of you don't quite totally fit in if you're not in Mormon, but they'll still be friendly with you. And he said, we talking to him, and at one point the guy said, it's whatever all that stuff is, we all believe it's all about being a good person, right? It's all about family, right? And he goes, no, it's not. He goes, what? He goes, you don't. And Jared started talking to me. He goes, you know all the stuff in the Bible, like the Noah. You don't believe all that, do you? He's like, yeah, really? So it was like for it captured for not for everybody, but for a lot of people, it's like liberal Christianity. It's the ethical life that's the draw. But paradoxically, it's got this other dark stuff.
Mormons are great.
Interesting
people.
Because
they're great people.
Yeah, that's really another thing that all those other religions have in common. It's all, you look at all of them, they're works based. I don't care what you say, how you spin it. Absolutely. They're all works based.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So Mormonism, Joseph Smith, again. Now here we are. We're on a podcast. I'm speaking confidently, so I'm coming across as like I'm an authority on this or whatever. To be honest, the Mormonism and Mormon history is a long past, and I have to get back into it and think about it. I still stay in touch, like on Facebook and stuff with Sandra Tanner, Chris Flacos, some of the people who were there back in the 80s when Mormon history was exploding, and so I'm speaking off the cuff, but I try to keep it accurate because I know some Mormons will hear it. But Mormonism has very occult beginnings. Joseph Smith, one historian back in the 80s, called him a grabber, where he would acquire bits and pieces from everything that was around him. And so my view, a pretty sober, objective view is, I call him like a backwoods kind of genius. He was a real good storyteller, and this is not slamming him, or he was just very versatile at picking up what's around him, synthesizing that into sometimes a not very consistent story, and he could tell a story, and so he was very charismatic,
and that's something.
And
else.
He was deep into the occult. He was, and when you think occult, you think of people black magic. No, I'm talking folk religion.
Magnetism. And,
like he's hunting treasure for his neighbors, and he's getting paid for that. Put his seer stone in the hat, and he can locate lost items. Like, he wasn't the only guy doing that. Lots of people were doing that. He's just part of that burnt over district, northern, upstate New York,
And
he
I think
moves west.
I think what's interesting too, Mormonism emerges, from. And you talked about having a Methodist upbringing. Brigham Young was a Methodist circuit riding preacher. I read John Turner's biography on Brigham Young, pioneer prophet, a few years ago. He has one on Joseph Smith I like to read too. He's not Mormon himself, but a historian at Notre Dame. But anyway, so yes, but that's a fascinating. Early Mormons, you think Mormons today, and you think you hear about the services, like you said, that are pretty bland. But early on, they were charismatic. They were faith healing. We call them. Totally. They traveled to England. I mean, they got a lot of converts in a short amount of time. Incredibly. You just wouldn't think that today. You hear Mormons, you just don't connect it with passion.
Yeah, there's a lot of power there. Now, another, since you want the occult weird stories, or you're interested in those, so like when Denise and we became really involved with Ex-Mormons for Jesus, that's another funny story. Because remember, I was going to be the mailman, father, husband,
right,
lawn mowing dad guy. No thought of getting into, academic history or anything like that, or even ministry, anything like that. But we established an Ex-Mormons for Jesus chapter, and so we went to a couple conferences.
Wow.
And those were amazing. One of the first conferences we went to was down in Southern California at what's now the Calvary Chapels College. It was on that, where that campus is, what that is. And we're in this one class, and this guy's talking about the occult origins of Mormon, and he says, "Now here's a book on witchcraft, and I want to read this to you. I'm going to go to this chapter," and he pages it to this chapter. And he goes, and it's telling people now this was before witchcraft was hip and cool. This was when it was like weirdos
crazy,
out in the city of Adelanto on the high desert having a witchcraft shop.
Santa Fe.
I'm serious. Like when I used to go four-wheeling out there in the 70s, there's a witchcraft shop out there.
Wow.
You're in the desert.
Dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
like
want
on the desert.
Yeah, out there. And so anyway, he's reading this book, and he goes, "Now you'll find this amazing. It tells you that if you're into this and you say you move to a new area," he says, "you'll want to go someplace where you're not going to stick out and you're just kind of going to fit in, because you want to get into the community and you don't want trouble." He says, "So go to a church like the Mormon church."
Wow.
And he instructs them to go there and get involved and be part of the Mormon church, because they won't see you.
Wow.
For who you are.
Yeah, you won't. They won't recognize
Your falsehood.
your false. Yeah.
Wow.
And then that ties into another story that I have, which was another incredible story. So we're Ex-Mormons for Jesus, and we're operating, and then we're going to have like a big open house at our house. We lived on Banner Road. We lived on Banner Mountain. Yeah. And so we're going to have like a big, an open house. So I advertised that, and the Mormons know about it. And by this time, they're starting to lose a few people locally. And so the day after that, we didn't have anybody show up. Maybe there's one or two people, friends. And so I go to work. And at that time, I was working at the post office. And what we would do is I was sorted mail. So we would send a guy in there at 4:30 in the morning to open the place up, get everything going, bring the mail in, and get it all ready to work. And then the rest of the clerks would come in later, which included men and women. Mm-hmm. And I know this sounds sexist or whatever, but that's how it was in those days. There was guys sleeping in the lobby and stuff. And so one of us guys would take the early shift and go open up. So I went in, and they start showing up. And we're sorting the mail, and this friend, this woman who worked with me, she comes in. She goes, "Bo, you left your lunch out at your car." And I said, "No, I didn't. Mm-hmm. I didn't bring a lunch." Mm-hmm. She goes, "No, there's a bag right by your car." Uh-oh. And I said, "Really?" So I went out, and by this time the sun's coming up, and there's this right by my door. There's this rolled up brown paper grocery bag. I unroll it, unravel it. And I've got photos of this.
Okay.
Because I took photos.
Is it from the Lafferty's?
And I opened it up, and there's a rooster in there with his head broken, his neck broken.
No way.
And a patch plucked right there with a cut and blood. So
An omen.
a curse.
A curse. A curse. It's like in Suriname, might see this.
And I was cursed in Africa when we went there. I've had curses there. And so I go, whoa. And so I went back in and got that coworker and I said,
Wow.
can you come out and witness this? Because, you're on federal property, it's assault, and we're postal workers, so
Right.
you can get the inspectors involved or whatever.
The record of it.
And so, so she came out, looked at it. I took photos and wrapped it up. And so when I got home from work, like at noon, I called the Christian Research Institute and asked them. They said, that's weird because there was another Ex-Mormons for Jesus chapter right down the hill from you in Roseville.
Oh boy.
They had a rooster like that thrown over their fence.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, oh, gosh, I'm getting cursed, And I knew by that time that there were weirdos. And at that time,
Dark elements.
yes, and the church, the LDS church at that time was picking up on it. And they were excommunicating people for witchcraft and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so I got to be careful what I say here. So
A rooster outside on that.
we moved away to Maine in the 90s, and I came back and found out that there was a Mormon that I would regularly encounter, like when we go witness because I go to the ward and witness.
Yeah, you used to witness. Remember you telling me that.
But I wasn't a jerk. I would just sit there and talk to anybody. Sometimes we stood out front and handed out things on the public access.
Yeah.
And people would take them. Some people would yell at us, and I did that for a little while. But there was a guy who was regularly really hostile towards me. There was 2 or 3 of them. Most of the Mormons would be like, "Huh, what are you doing?" Or you should be ashamed of yourself. But there were some people who were, you could tell there was violence back there. Like they were not happy. And one of the guys, when I got back, I found out through the grapevine that he'd been excommunicated for witchcraft.
Wow.
And then the next thing I saw, he was in law enforcement.
Get out.
Yeah, he's long gone.
Okay, I was gonna say, is this
And
local?
so I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
This is like something out of like a horror novel.
You don't make this up. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, okay, to our viewers, I could be making this up.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Probability,
Yeah.
you're
No.
probably not.
You have photos.
I have photos of that, and I don't know who did it.
Okay.
I just know that there was
Interesting.
somebody who was generally hostile towards me.
And it is kind of a universal symbol of like a curse.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
Across cultures. Yeah, the chicken
Yeah,
thing.
that's what I said. I said, what is this? And they said, it sounds like Santeria or something.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
And I said, but I'm a Mormon. They said, well, it's just general occult.
When I was in Suriname, they would have people that would pray like at a prayer be in a church and kind of pray like to praise that someone had left like an omen and they didn't experience death or some kind of curse. So for me, it was like, wow, that's a big deal. But
Yeah,
you would
yes.
never.
So your average rank and file Mormon, they're not into witchcraft.
Nope, you're
They're
right.
Not, but if a Mormon is listening and they're just a regular old Mormon, they know that somebody in their ward has talked to their dead relatives. Those stories are just infinite.
It's interesting. One of the things, if I could, I don't know this person, Michael Wilder personally, but I've listened to his like 17-minute testimony at some church down in Temecula or somewhere he had, like in 2013, and he talks about being converted. If you've ever seen that, you Google ex-Mormon becomes a Christian. But I've watched it probably at least 6-7 times. It almost gives me tears every time. It's beautiful because he basically, his basic thing is that a lot of people are mean to the Mormon missionaries when they come. Or rude.
That's wrong.
It's wrong, and I'm sure you're in.
I've got a great story about that I'd love to tell.
Well, maybe to tell after this. In Michael Wilder's story, without giving it, he basically just says multiple people encourage him and they love him and they don't affirm his beliefs, but the one pastor says, Elder Wilder, I encourage you to read the Bible like a child for the first time.
Amen.
And he actually does it and he gets saved. But he said initially very hostile to anyone saying that. So the supernatural aspect, his whole family's converted. You got that Sean McDowell has a great podcast with this interview, but he has a book too. But anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah, and these supernatural events, they're spaced by years. Like, you know.
It wasn't like every other day.
No.
But did they subside once you really dove into your faith in Christ, or had that?
No, I'd say they accelerated.
Really?
No,
Oh,
yeah.
sure. No, I've heard of that.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it did get to the point where later on, we were kind of notorious because we had this Ex-Mormons for Jesus chapter, and people were leaving the church. And not just because of us, but it was a trend at that time where people were finding out about Mormonism, Mormons themselves. Like when I left Mormonism in the 70s, late 70s, I thought there's something wrong with me. Nobody ever does this. And I am so not unusual. I am so pedestrian. My life is just really, I think people just miss a lot because they're not paying attention or something, but I am not original. When we came into Ex-Mormons for Jesus, it was just burgeoning at that time. And you start meeting people, and everyone thought that up until 1980.
Wow.
Because you're isolated. All your friends are Mormons, and you think there's something wrong with you because you couldn't keep the word of wisdom, or you couldn't, you know, and
A burden on your back.
so yeah. So when you, but you're an anomaly. Nobody leaves the church. It's kind of like a mindset.
You can't leave.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody leaves the church. Only some weirdos, and they're sons of perdition or something. Yeah. And so, getting out and meeting all these people, but so by the late '80s, I'd kind of gotten out of that because I found that people wanted me to be a gunslinger. Like, will you come meet my Mormon friend? We'll set him up, and then you'll drop the hammer. Oh gosh! And I'm like, that's just not in my
Punisher.
Yeah.
Like I went up to BYU. With one guy, we handed out 25,000 pieces of literature.
Wow,
That's where I met,
25,000.
some good friends and stuff,
Yeah.
So, and I, had people threaten me. And so I'd been through that whole thing. So, there's people that are made for that. And I just thought, nah, I'm not into that. And at that time I was into church leadership too. So I was kind of like, I want to focus on this. That's pretty negative. And that's all covered. There's plenty of people doing that. So one day at home, we get the missionaries knock on the door, and I was in a lull, and I said, yeah. I said, well, we're former Mormons, and we were married in the temple, but we've left the church. And he goes, well, these two guys were great. They go, well, we'd like to talk to you anyway. And I said, well, if you talk to your stake president, he wouldn't
Approve of this?
Yeah, he wouldn't
Oh, boy.
approve of this. And you guys, I'll chat with you anytime. And they go, no, we'll check with the stake president. Will you go through the missionary lessons with us? And I said, sure, yeah, I'd love to do that. And I said, now when it comes up to something I don't agree with, I think is wrong, I'll tell you. But I wasn't going to ram these guys because they're 19 years old. And there is a sense in which these guys are under enough pressure anyway. I don't want to be the guy that, I don't want to be, I'm going to be forthright with them.
Yeah.
But I don't want these guys to commit suicide or something.
Oh, man.
So, because that does happen.
It's interesting, and I think we probably wrap this thing up just because we've covered so much, but this is definitely going to be a
We're gonna have to come back.
to come back to
We're
some
gonna
of
have
more of
to
these.
come back.
Can I just really quick?
Absolutely.
Yes, of course.
Two more
Oh,
missionaries?
absolutely, yes.
Do
So
it.
they came, and for some reason they said in our ward we don't get invited over for dinner or anything. So they became friends with our kids. We started having over for dinner. And some people will say you don't even welcome them. These are Mormon missionaries. They don't know. They're not the wolves.
No.
And so we went through that whole process, got to know him really well. And one of them, it was his birthday. We got him a birthday cake.
Ah,
And-
that's beautiful.
Yeah, so it was great. So and we witnessed to him. I just didn't hammer him. So that's just not my thing.
Wow.
Wow.
Well,
Thank you.
Well, gosh, I mean, I think that was a wonderful set of stories, and maybe obviously you can contact us in the comments or contact us in our personal emails if you'd like to have questions about, if you'd like to talk to Bo specifically, and well, that I think gives us a good amount of time, and I think we're gonna have to do this again and other stuff coming up in the next episode. Fun stuff.
I look so forward to more stories.
Edifying.
And I think next time we have a guest. Is that right?
Yes, we do. We have a guest that you know well.
Yes.
Rex Ruth and the Jesus Revolution.
Producer Kyla's daddy. Yep. Well, thanks, guys. Till next time on The Pastor and Postmaster. Meow. Brow.
Goodbye.
Brow.